Okay, do I start talking now? Okay. Well, I am extremely interested in the unequal distribution of the wealth of a nation. And part of this is because I grew up in a home that had plenty of space and someone to cook my meals, so my mother didn't cook, which was a blessing. And then right next door was a family that the daughter of this family and I would play. We played hide and seek, and I hid in her closet, and she had one dress. And so that really, at age 6, really told me that something was different here. So I noticed that in those days, the poor people mixed in with the rich people for some reason in my little community. But in the way things are now, the poor people live kind of together, and the richer people live together, and the amount of immunization that occurs is really sad. The poor people can get jobs in the rich people's homes, or cutting their grass or stuff, but the rich people just don't know what it's like to be poor. And I went to a private school, and I had there, my best friends were people there on scholarship. And so I saw their way of living, and it was very interesting and much different from my parents' way of living. And I swore I didn't want to be rich when I grew up, which wasn't hard to do. It was very easy not to accumulate wealth when you have 4 kids and your husband's not working and so on. But because I had had such a lovely kind of well taken care of childhood, I never worried, and neither did my mom, of whether we could afford groceries this week. That kind of thing. I never had to experience that. So that being poor as an adult with 4 kids to feed was an adventure. In that I knew, for instance, that if I didn't have the money for food next week, I could go to my parents. Not that I would, because I was very proud, but I mean, being poor to me was very different from being poor, really being poor. So I look at the world now, and I see that there's even more division between rich and poor. And I see also that there's even more not being aware of, unawareness of the difference, except among a certain group of people who make it their business to be aware, whether they are whatever socioeconomic thing they come from. I'm thinking, for instance, of some of the churches that have a very strong sense of what is going on around outside of my neighborhood, or what is going on around under my feet that I'm not paying attention to. There's a very strong awareness, I find, among, for instance, the Unitarians and the Quakers. I, being atheist, don't go to either of the churches, but the people I know, and I have gone occasionally, too, because it's just a nice experience. Especially the Quakers, you just sit and be. And that's really a good experience. Anyway, the amount of unawareness of the huge difference between the ability to go to the store and buy anything you want versus go to the store and maybe at the back end of the store they'll have something they're going to throw out that they will let you have for half price. There's a big difference between these people, and we're not aware enough of it to satisfy me. I do believe that war and that kind of human experience not only does it take away our ability to be aware, and I have the time and the energy to be aware of this change, or this stratification of our society, but it also, the war increases it. And it's a terrific waste of resource. And it's very, very hard to really look at war, to really know or imagine that you might be able to put yourself in the shoes of someone who is cowering in the hall of an apartment building wondering if the next huge blast will be their blast, that will have their name on it. To be unable to have your children have a pet dog or have a normal childhood in any way. The amount of distress that we are forcing on the human race is incredible, and we're doing it to ourselves. The amount of energy and money put into something that would correct these horrific situations is minimal. People don't talk about ending war. They say it's impossible, but it isn't. I mean, if we can get to the moon, for Christ's sakes, we can certainly do something about war and this thing of loving your neighbor. Well, maybe you don't want to love your neighbor, but you certainly might get to know them, and that means countries too. So here I am at age 80, I'll be 84 at the end of February, and here I am, an old lady, and feeling extremely helpless. And the only thing I know to do for me is to be aware, to not close my eyes, no matter how hard it is to look, how hard it is to not only look, but take it in a non-judgmental way. And the judgmental part is really important because I come from a family that I could be very judgmental about in terms of their values and mine. And yet I want to love them. I mean, especially at this age. And so to put aside the judgment and just, for one thing, I really believe in doing by example or persuading by example rather than preaching. So I'm working hard to do that. And I think that's all I have to say.